Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that affects every single one of us, those heavy chains of regret that we've been dragging behind us for far too long. If you've ever laid awake at night, replaying mistakes from your past, wincing at memories of things you wish you'd done differently, or feeling that knot in your stomach when certain moments flash through your mind, this video is specifically for you. Before we get started, I want you to know that what I'm about to share transformed my own relationship with regret. The principles we'll explore today aren't just theoretical, they're practical wisdom that's been tested across thousands of years. So if you're tempted to skip ahead, I'd encourage you to stay with me. The foundation we build in these first few minutes will make everything that follows much more powerful. Have you ever noticed how your mind can turn a single regrettable moment into a life sentence? How one mistake from years ago still has the power to hijack your thoughts and emotions? Today, that's what we're breaking free from. Not by ignoring our past, but by learning how to relate to it differently. I've spent years studying the ancient philosophy of Stoicism, not the modern misconception of being emotionless, but the original. Teachings about living with wisdom, courage, and tranquility, regardless of external circumstances. And what fascinated me was how directly these ancient philosophers addressed the very human tendency to become prisoners of our regrets. The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote something that stopped me in my tracks when I first read it. He said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Think about that for a moment. How many hours, days, or even years have you spent suffering not because of what's happening now, but because you're mentally revisiting regrets from the past? Our regrets create a double suffering, first from the original event, and then repeatedly from our ongoing relationship with the memory. But today, we're going to explore how to unchain ourselves from this cycle, using wisdom that has stood the test of time. Let's start with understanding exactly what regret is and why it affects us so deeply. Regret isn't just disappointment, it's a complex emotion involving self-blame about choices we've made. It's that feeling of, if only I had done something differently. What makes regret particularly painful is that it combines sadness about the outcome with personal responsibility. We don't just feel bad about what happened, we feel bad about ourselves for causing it to happen. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who began his life as a slave before becoming one of the most respected teachers in Rome, had profound insight into this emotion. He taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This perspective recognizes a fundamental truth that can begin to loosen those chains of regret. We have complete control over some things, partial control over others, and no control at all over many things. When we regret, we often blur these distinctions. We take responsibility not just for our choices, but for outcomes that were never fully in our control. Or we torture ourselves for not knowing information that wasn't available to us at the time. The first step toward freedom is gaining clarity about what was truly within your control and what wasn't. I want you to try something with me. Think about a regret that's been weighing on you. Now divide a mental page into 3 columns. Things that were completely in your control, things partially in your control, and things entirely outside your control. Be honest, but also compassionate with yourself as you sort the elements of this situation. What you'll likely find is that many aspects of the outcome you regret weren't actually yours to control. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibility, quite the opposite. The Stoics were adamant about taking full responsibility for our choices and actions, but they also recognized the futility of taking responsibility for things beyond our influence. As Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The freedom begins when we stop confusing the two. But what about those things that genuinely were within our control? The choices we made that we truly wish we hadn't? Here, another Stoic principle offers powerful medicine, the idea that our mistakes and failures are our greatest teachers. Seneca advised, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." This applies not just to others, but to ourselves as well. Can you approach your past mistakes with kindness, seeing them as painful but valuable lessons rather than evidence of your unworthiness? Every regret contains within it a lesson about your values. When you feel regret, it's because something you did or failed to do conflicted with what matters to you. In this way, regret itself is evidence of your moral compass. The fact that you feel regret shows that you care, that you have principles and values that matter to you. This is something to be appreciated, not punished. The Stoic approach isn't to eliminate regret entirely. It's to transform our relationship with it, to extract the wisdom it offers without carrying the burden indefinitely. As Epictetus put it, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. So how do we react to our past in a way that frees rather than imprisons us? Let me share some practical Stoic-inspired strategies that have helped me and countless others. First, practice what I call regret boundaries. Just as we set boundaries with people who drain our energy, we need boundaries with thoughts that repeatedly drag us into unproductive rumination. When you catch yourself sliding into the spiral of regret, gently but firmly redirect your attention to the present moment. Notice the physical sensations in your body, the sounds around you, your breath. This isn't about suppressing the thought, but about choosing where you place your attention. The Stoics were early practitioners of mindfulness, though they didn't use that term. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice." The past may knock at the door of your mind, but you decide whether to invite it in for an extended stay. Second, extract the lesson. If a regret keeps returning to your consciousness, it may contain wisdom you haven't fully integrated. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this that will guide my future choices? Once you've identified the lesson, write it down. The act of articulating the lesson helps your mind recognize that there was purpose in the pain. As Seneca noted, difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. Third, practice self-forgiveness as a deliberate act. The Stoics understood that holding on to self-blame after extracting the lesson serves no purpose. Epictetus taught, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" This humorous approach shows how we can acknowledge our imperfections without being defined by them. Self-forgiveness isn't a one-time event, but a practice. It begins with the recognition that making mistakes is an inevitable part of being human. It continues with making amends where possible and committing to different choices in the future. And it culminates in the decision to stop punishing yourself for past errors. One powerful practice is to write a letter of forgiveness to yourself from the perspective of your wisest, most compassionate self. What would that version of you say about this regret? What broader perspective might they offer? What understanding and compassion might they extend? Fourth, use the Stoic practice of negative visualization to gain perspective on your regrets. This involves deliberately contemplating worse scenarios than what actually occurred. How could the situation you regret have turned out even more painfully? What additional mistakes might you have made but didn't? This practice isn't about minimizing your experience, but about recognizing that within the spectrum of possible outcomes, things could have been worse. Seneca advised regular contemplation of worst-case scenarios not to increase anxiety, but to reduce it through familiarity and preparation. Similarly, when we contemplate how our regrets could have been even more severe, we often find gratitude for the lessons we learned before the cost grew higher. Now, I want to address something important. Some regrets stem from choices that had serious consequences for ourselves or others. I'm not suggesting that all regrets can or should be easily dismissed. Some actions require making amends, restitution, or significant life changes. The Stoic approach isn't about bypassing accountability, but about facing it directly while not allowing past mistakes to define your entire identity or future potential. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Your regrets, even the most painful ones, can become the very path through which you develop greater wisdom, compassion, and integrity, but only if you're willing to learn from them rather than being paralyzed by them. This brings us to another powerful Stoic concept, Amor Fati, love of fate. Friedrich Nietzsche later popularized this phrase, but it has deep roots in Stoic philosophy. It doesn't mean passively accepting everything that happens, but rather embracing your complete life story, including your mistakes and regrets, as essential to becoming who you are today. Every choice you regret, every mistake you made, has shaped your understanding, your compassion, your resilience. Without those experiences, you wouldn't be who you are now. This doesn't mean you're glad about painful events, but that you recognize their role in your development. Epictetus, who endured slavery and disability, taught, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well." This radical acceptance doesn't prevent you from working toward positive change. Rather, it gives you a solid foundation from which to create that change. I want to pause here and check in with you. If you've stayed with me this far, you're demonstrating a real commitment to freeing yourself from the weight of past regrets. The path we're exploring isn't about quick fixes or oversimplified solutions. It's about a fundamental shift in how you relate to your past, a shift that creates lasting freedom rather than temporary relief. Here's where many people get stuck. They intellectually understand these principles, but struggle to embody them. Emotionally, the gap between knowing and living is where practice comes in. The Stoics were adamant that philosophy wasn't an academic exercise, but a way of life, requiring daily practice and application. Let me share a daily practice that has helped me tremendously. Each evening, I take a few moments for reflection, asking myself 3 questions. What did I do well today? Where could I have done better? What will I do differently tomorrow? This simple practice, inspired by Stoic self-examination, keeps regrets from accumulating. By acknowledging areas for improvement daily and committing to different choices, you prevent small missteps from growing into major sources of future regret. As Seneca advised, every night before going to sleep, we must ask ourselves, what weakness did I overcome today? What virtue did I practice? But what about those past regrets that still feel heavy despite your best efforts to learn and move forward? Here, another Stoic practice offers powerful medicine, Memento Mori. Remember, you must die. This isn't morbid, it's clarifying. Contemplating the finite nature of your life naturally shifts your focus from past regrets to present choices. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. When we maintain awareness of life's brevity, we become less willing to spend our precious time in the prison of regret and more motivated to live according to our deepest values now. This perspective gives us the courage to make amends where possible, to have difficult conversations we've been avoiding, to change directions when necessary. It reminds us that while we cannot change the past, we have tremendous power to shape our present response to it. The chains of regret are heavy, but they're not unbreakable. Every time you catch yourself being pulled into rumination about the past, you have a new opportunity to practice responding differently. Every moment offers a fresh choice. Remember the words of Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Your regrets don't define you unless you allow them to. They are events that happened, lessons you've learned, not the essence of who you are. As we begin to wrap up this exploration, I want to offer one final Stoic practice that has been particularly transformative in my own journey with regret. The view from above. This involves mentally stepping back and viewing your life from a broader perspective, seeing your regrets as small parts of a much larger story. Imagine floating above your life, seeing it in its entirety, past, present, and future possibilities. From this expanded perspective, how significant are the regrets that have been weighing on you? How might they look different when viewed as single threads in the larger tapestry of your life? Marcus Aurelius practiced this regularly, writing, "Think of the universal substance, of which you have a very small portion, and of universal time, of which a short and indivisible interval has been assigned to you, and of the destiny, what part of it you are." This isn't about diminishing your experience, but about gaining a liberating perspective. When we see our regrets from this expanded viewpoint, they often lose some of their overwhelming power. We recognize them as chapters in our story, not the entire book. So where do we go from here? How do we integrate these ancient philosophies into our very modern lives with their unique pressures and challenges? It begins with a decision. The decision to relate to your past differently, to extract its wisdom without remaining chained to it. And it continues with consistent practice, with gentle persistence when old patterns emerge, with compassion for yourself when the journey isn't linear. The Stoics understood that philosophical principles must be lived to be valuable. As Seneca said, "Philosophy is no trick to catch the public. It is not devised for show. It is a matter, not of words, but of facts. It is not pursued so that the day may yield some amusement before it is spent, or that our leisure may be relieved of tedium. It shapes and builds the personality, orders our life, regulates our conduct, shows us what we should do and what we should leave undone." Let today be the beginning of a new relationship with your regrets, one where you honor their lessons while refusing to be defined by them, where you take responsibility for your choices without punishing yourself indefinitely, where you use the wisdom of the past to create a more intentional present. Your heart deserves to be unchained. Your energy deserves to be directed toward creating rather than ruminating. Your life deserves to be lived fully in the present, enriched by the lessons of the past, but not imprisoned by them. As the Stoics would remind us, freedom isn't the absence of challenges, but the ability to respond to them with wisdom. Your regrets can become the very soil from which your wisdom grows, if you're willing to plant seeds rather than just revisiting old wounds. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you found value in these ideas, please consider sharing this video with someone who might be struggling with their own chains of regret. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer each other is a new perspective. Until next time, remember the words of Marcus Aurelius. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. May you find that inner freedom, one thought at a time.